How to Become a Millionaire by Age.
Brian, I am so excited about this because I think we all have this idea. I want to be a millionaire. I want to be a millionaire. Even if we want to be multi-millionaires because we understand how the value of money changes through time. What I love about this show, what I love about what we're going to talk about today is that it is not an inescapable goal. It is not something that is not attainable for most folks if you just understand the things that I should be doing and maybe also the things that I specifically should not be doing.
And I want our audience to follow the thread that I think, this is why I love how everything is so integrated with the Money Guy Show, is that we talk about how to become a millionaire by age, but it also is hitting upon the pillars of the 3 ingredients to wealth.
Yep.
When I'm talking about the 3 ingredients, I'm talking about, of course, discipline. You live on less than you make so you can create margin in your life to have the second ingredient, which is turning that discipline into money. And then you invest that money with enough time, the third ingredient. That is actually the recipe for success. And here's what's cool. If you're young, meaning you have an abundance of time, and you're disciplined, it doesn't require as much money. And you can work with these ingredients and figure it out. So we want to walk through, because it is going to be different for a 20-year-old than it is for a 50-year-old. So I think it's nice to tell you by age what you can consider and what you can control to maximize your journey.
And here's what's amazing. It's so simple. It's so beautiful. It's 3 ingredients. That's it. And yet, so many people miss it. So many people screw this up. We're going to show you some of the things that the average American does to screw it up. So Brian, let's jump right in. Let's start at the beginning. Let's start at the 20s. Let's talk about what the average person in their 20s does. And unfortunately, it's a sad state of affairs in this country. They're not necessarily doing the things that we would encourage them to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about spending less than you make. Well, if you just look at the research, only 40% of Americans spend less than they make. That means the majority are spending every bit of what they earn plus some. So if you can't even respect the first ingredient to wealth, which is discipline, understanding deferred gratification, how can you expect to be successful for the long term?
Not only are they doing this, not only they're living above their means, the other thing that folks in their 20s are doing, the average American, is they don't recognize, hey, I need to save a little bit because unknown things will happen. They are not prepared for emergencies. If you look at the numbers right now, according to Bankrate, 56% of Americans have less than $1,000 in savings, meaning 56% of Americans, if something were to happen, if they were to have to go to the doctor, have an automobile accident, have something in their life happen that was unexpected, they could not take care of it without going into debt. That is not where you want to be.
One of the benefits I have working here for the Money Guy Show is that they keep me up on terminology. And they found out, the team told me I'm using YOLO way too much. You only live once. They're like, Brian, that is pass. And I was like, okay, doing it for the gram. And they're like, Brian, nobody says it like that anymore. So I will tell you the new term that was introduced to me, and we'll see if I'm using this appropriately, is do it for the plot.
There you go.
And when I say that, what I mean is that some of these younger generations, and it's appropriate that you'll have the older guy saying this, are taking vacations that might not equal or match where they are in their financial journey.
It's wild. When you look at all the generational breakdowns, Gen Z and millennials, so these are on the younger side of the age spectrum, are the biggest spenders when it comes to vacations. They spend about $3,500 per trip. I want you to contrast that to the fact that 56% of Americans cannot come up with $1,000 if an emergency happened, and yet Gen Z and millennials are spending $3,500 on vacations. They have got something out of whack. So if you want to be a millionaire, if you want to be a financial mutant, you're not going to look this way. You're actually going to look a little bit different. Let's talk about what the millionaire mindset behaviors in your 20s look like.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that the majority fall into the consumption trap. So we do live in a society with lots of spending on advertising, lots of things that are just pounding you, and loading up your ears and eyes with all the things you should be doing. But I'm going to tell you, success is being that financial mutant, having that contrarian mindset. So here's the first thing. If you're going to start in your 20s, it doesn't have to be a lot. A little goes a long way.
Yeah, if you can live below your means, if you can choose to defer just a little bit of today for a big, more beautiful tomorrow, it gets really exciting really fast. We actually have a tool you can go look at. Go to moneyguy.com/resources, and we show you at young ages, if you can start at 20 or 25 or 30 or right before your 30s, we show you at different percentage savings rates how much of your income you'll be able to replace by the time you get to retirement, by the time you get to age 65. Well, the beautiful thing here is if you can get a really healthy savings rate early on in your 20s and you can save 25% of your gross income, what's likely going to happen for you is you're not going to have to work all the way until age 65. You're likely going to be able to give yourself options much, much earlier in life, and it does not take a lot to go a very long way.
The next thing you can do if you want to make sure that you're doing this, the millionaire path, especially if you're in your 20s, is you actually have an emergency fund. If you look at the financial order of operations, go to moneyguy.com/resources. Having cash reserves for emergencies is not just a step one, it's also a step four. It has 2 of the 9 steps are making sure that you have emergency money, because what I'm trying to protect you from by having emergency reserves is you don't have to make those desperate decisions where you rely upon debt or other things to kind of fill in the gaps. If you actually respect it and you have your highest deductible covered, you won't be derailed before you even get out of the gates and start building your own success story.
I love it. And then the third millionaire mindset, the third millionaire behavior that I think that you should have in your 20s is rather than doing it for the plot today, you're doing it for the plot in the future. You are focused on the future. And so what you do so that you're not missing out today is you learn how to bedazzle your basic life. Brian, you talk about this all the time. You kind of mastered this early on, even in your 20s and 30s.
Yeah, I don't want people, because look, I'm not telling you to put your head down and be a miser and don't enjoy your 20s, don't enjoy your 30s while you're on this journey to building wealth. I'm just telling you might need to do it a little differently. We call it the bedazzled basic life, is that still go on trips. Go do things to create memories, but they don't have to be so expensive. There's nothing wrong with a good road trip. There's nothing wrong. And I even think about, I went to Europe before we had children, but I did it in a way that was 20 to 30% cheaper. I mean, or 70% cheaper. It was on a budget of a quarter of what most people go to Europe on, but we stayed in cruddy hotels. We were dragging our luggage down cobblestone streets. We were getting ripped off by the locals in about every city we went into, but that's okay, because here's the good news about memories. Take it from somebody who's a little bit older. Memories blossom over time. The things that give you stress or maybe weren't so great in the moment, over time, they become better. You drop off the negative stuff, and some of that stuff becomes the funny little anecdotes of your stories. Just go out there, make memories, enjoy each decade of your life, but just also be respectful that it doesn't derail your great, big, beautiful tomorrow.
So let's talk about the math. Let's talk about the actual brass tacks. Check this out. If you are a 20-year-old and you want to be a millionaire by the time that you get to age 65, you only have to save $95 a month.
That's right.
That's it, less than $100 a month. If you're a 25-year-old and you want to get to millionaire status, you only have to save $184 a month. And if you're a 29-year-old and you're just starting out at zero and you want to get to millionaire status, you only have to save about $300 a month. But we've already told you time can be so valuable. What's amazing is that if you save throughout your 20s and you get to age 29, and you have saved up in your 20s $38,200, do you realize you have already done enough hard work that without saving another dollar, that lump sum, that $38,000, has the ability to turn into $1 million by the time that you get to age 65. So in your 20s, it does not take a lot. It just takes a little bit of discipline and a lot of time to do some pretty amazing things.
Yeah, a lot of you are probably watching this going, hey, wait a minute, I'm 23, I'm 27. What are my numbers? I would encourage you to go to moneyguy.com/resources. And you can actually download our free copy of Are You on Track to Be a Millionaire to see exactly where you need to be.
All right, Brian, so we've talked about the 20s. Now let's talk about the 30s. How do you become a millionaire in your 30s? Well, I think one of the things that you have to do is you have to not look like the average American in their 30s, because unfortunately, we all of us hit the messy middle. It may look different for us, but we all get pulled in different directions. We all have different things happen to us. What's so interesting, though, is the way that we respond to that is not the same. And it is a stark contrast between those that have the mutant mindset and the average American, because the average American falls into traps that can absolutely derail your long-term financial success.
I think it's interesting. I found when I was in my 30s, this is probably when you are in that messy middle. You found a significant other. You may be settling down to grow a family. But for me, when you have these life things happen, when you settle into the neighborhood, it can feel a little bit like high school again. And the fact that now the comparison, the whole comparison to you, what are the Joneses doing down the street, and moving the goalpost on what success is for you, and it's easy because more than likely somebody down the street's gonna be driving the luxury car. Yeah, you're gonna go in their kitchen and they're gonna have a little bit better countertop than you. You're gonna see the Rolex on their arms, and you're gonna be, holy cow, I am just not doing this right. So make sure you don't fall into these consumption traps that I think a lot of people, and one of the first ones is automobiles.
Yep.
When I see these stats, Bo, it actually makes me sad.
It's absolutely awful. We talk all the time that when it comes to buying a car, when it comes to reliable transportation, we want you to subscribe to 23/8. When you buy a car, we want you to put 20% down. We don't want you to finance it for any more than 3 years or 36 months, and your total car payments cannot exceed 8% of your gross income. So you think, all right, that seems pretty easy, seems pretty simple. Well, let's see how most Americans stack up. We say that you want to put 20% down. Average American only puts down 14%. So we fail right there. 3 years or less. The average new car loan right now is 69 months. That's 5.8 years, nowhere near the 3-year limit.
But by the way, before you do the 8%, you realize if people are putting down less and they're financing it that far out, people are buying way too expensive cars because look at how much it is as a percentage.
Yeah, if we say that you need to stay between 8%, you need to stay underneath 8% of your gross income, the average car payment right now, $733. If you look at that relative to the median income in this country, it represents 12% of the median income. If you are someone who has a $1,000 car payment, and we know you're out there because you put it on social media, you are spending 17% of the median income in this country. You are more than double what we recommend on 23/8. If you're doing it this way, you're doing it wrong.
I think it's interesting. In a minute, we're going to show you what a person in their 30s needs to be saving per month to become a millionaire at retirement. And I want you to remember that the average car payment in the United States right now is $733. Because if you just understand the power of your army of dollar bills and the value of what time is, because remember those 3 ingredients. Discipline creates money, and money over time is what creates wealth. You got to have those 3 components. If you're spending money of $733 on a car, I would tell you that you are sacrificing the good discipline that is then costing you the money, and you're wasting valuable time. You'll never get ahead.
All right, so it's not just cars that these 30-year-olds or folks in the 30s are falling into. They also fall into the trap of high interest debt, running up credit card debt. Listen to this. The average millennial right now today has $6,000 of credit card debt. Now, that doesn't mean that they're putting $6,000 on their card. That means that is $6,000 that's carrying over month to month to month. And we've talked about in the market, if you can go out there and earn a 10%, 8% rate of return, that's amazing. These credit cards are charging you what? 20, 25, 30% interest. You will never get ahead if you're racking up high interest debt. So don't live beyond your means and rob your future self by using credit cards.
Well, and I think this third one, I'm going to tell you a little contrarian thing that I see about it is they're house poor.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
There is a financial kind of contrarian advice out there is you want to be the cheapest house on an expensive street.
Sure.
I don't know that I completely agree with that one because you do not want to be the poorest person on your street. And because I think there's a lot of people, they stretch and they try to get in as big of a house as possible so they can, grow into it for their growing family. But guys, if you have all of your money going towards housing, how are you going to have money for memories? How are you going to have money for investing for your future self so you can live a better life even in the future? I'm telling you, you're going to come up short, and the stats show this.
Yeah, look at this. 1 in 5 U.S. households say they spend over 40% of more of their gross income on housing. Almost half of their gross income on housing. Well, what happens if something goes wrong? What happens if something doesn't go quite the way that you thought? You're going to be in a pickle. And look at this. Nearly 1 in 3 households are over 30% or more of their gross income in housing. You know that our rule is we say that when it comes to buying a house, your housing cost should not exceed 25% of your gross income. And yet here we are, 1 in 3 households grossly breaks through that. If you want to be a millionaire in your 30s, or if you want to have the millionaire mindset in your 30s, you cannot look like the average American. You have to look a little bit different.
Yeah, I want you to have margin in your life so you can save for the future, so you can actually take the family on vacation and create memories. If all of your money is going into your house, and by the way, the nicer the house you live in, the more furniture it's going to require, the higher your property taxes are going to be, the higher your insurance is going to be. It is, you give a mouse a cookie and all this stuff starts piling on top of itself. Be careful with these consumption decisions because they can work against your happiness and your long-term financial success.
All right, so what do 30-year-olds do? Well, the first thing they do is they understand they have to keep their debt in check. High interest debt is non-existent for millionaire mindset mutants, and they're following the money guy rules. They understand 23/8 when it comes to buying a car. They understand keeping housing at less than 25%. They recognize that debt can be a very useful tool, but they use it as a tool and don't let it be something that can be dangerous and actually ends up hurting them.
They also, if you look at what 25%, we always have that chart that shows, hey man, if you're good with money and you can just defer and save 25%, look what it can do. In your 30s, there's still lots of green on that. If you go to moneyguy.com/resources, we actually will show you what your savings rate needs to be by age. And there's a lot of prime opportunity for those in their 30s.
Now remember, we already told you that it's super easy in your 20s if you start. But guess what? It's not so hard in your 30s. If you just start at age 30 and you can save 25%, there's still a really good chance that you could be on track for early retirement. Or you can have a life that you get to live a great, big, beautiful tomorrow, but your 30s is where you have to get serious about it. In your 20s, you get a little bit of leeway. You're going to see in a moment, in the 40s, it doesn't quite work that way. And the other thing that you have to do in your 30s, you have to make sure that you're keeping an eye on the things that could cause you to derail your financial life. You understand, if you have the millionaire mindset, how important an emergency fund is, how important it is to have contingencies in place to keep you and your family protected. And this isn't just don't take our word for it. We actually have analytical data to share with you. You know, every year, Brian, we ask all of our financial planning clients of the firm, we ask a questionnaire that they go through. Hey, how do you approach this? What do you think? How do you do these things? And we ask them, hey, how big is your emergency fund? And it's really interesting. The vast majority of our respondents said, I have at least 4 months, even to as much as more than 7 months in an emergency fund. Less than 1% of folks said, I got under 1 month. Less than 1% of folks said, hey, I'm not prepared for an emergency that might rear its ugly head, and I know that no matter what happens, I'm not going to be derailed.
Well, I think this is the decade of the messy middle, meaning you more than likely have a significant other. You more than likely are, starting the process of having children. Mm-hmm. If people are counting on you and your income and your money to pay the bills, make sure you're not overlooking the need to have emergency reserves. Life is going to come at you fast with all kind of emergencies and obstacles. How you're able to overcome that is definitely going to be part of your success story. Don't get caught swimming naked with no money in the cash reserves because you thought you were going to be cute and smart and have everything invested, because that is, when it rains, it pours. Bad news travels in groups, and I just don't want you to get caught in a desperate situation by not paying respect to emergency funds.
All right, so now let's look at the numbers. Let's do a spot check first. So you realize if you're a 30-year-old and you've been saving in your 20s and you've already accumulated $43,000, just that $43,000 will put you on track to be a millionaire by age 65. But maybe you're starting at age 30, or maybe you want to figure out how much does it take to have another million. Well, every $340 a month you can save starting at age 30 can turn into $1 million by the time you get to 65. A 35-year-old, if you're starting at zero, you need to save $600 a month to get to $1 million by 65. And then if you wait till 39, this is where it starts to get a little bit harder. If you wait until 39 to start, it takes almost $1,000 a month to be able to get you to millionaire status. However, time is still on your side. If you're a 39-year-old and you've saved up through 401ks, through Roth IRAs, through all the other investing means, and you've saved up $122,500, you already have enough soldiers in your army of dollar bills that are putting you on track to get to millionaire status by the time you get to age 65.
Well, I also want to remind people, small decisions go a long way.
Yeah.
It's just like I was talking about the car purchases. We showed you the stats for the typical American. Their car payment is well over $700. They're financing for close to 6 years. Look at the stats here. You only need to be saving for a 30-year-old $340 a month. That's less than $700. 35-year-old, $606 a month. That's less than the average $700 car payment. So you can see there is an incremental decision being made by every American on fancy car,
or $1 million.
Or $1 million in the future. And that's the part I want you to be slapped with the reality of, that you do have a choice here. It is a choice to become a millionaire. Don't fall into the consumption traps. Comparison is the thief of joy. And also comparison is the thief of your financial independence. If you're moving the goalposts and trying to keep up with the broke Joneses and not funding your financial future. Yes, I know deferred gratification is not as fun as living for the now. YOLO. Despite what all my team wants me to say. I'm still going to say it because you're going to live to a ripe old age. Plan and act accordingly.
If you want to check out a free resource, go to moneyguide.com/resources. And we have this deliverable. Are you on track to be a millionaire? Well, you can actually look at your specific age and you can see two pieces of information. How much do I need to have saved presently to be on track to be a millionaire? Or how much do I need to start saving to get to $1 million? Go check that out and let this be the motivation to get you to start making those incremental decisions today.
So 40-year-olds, 40s is one of those, that decade where it really is a split in the road. It is a crossroads of, if you made good decisions when you're young, you're starting to see the dividends and the fruits from that. If you have really deferred and procrastinated making those good financial decisions, you need to get super serious at this point. And I worry about this because I think if you're trying to figure out, are you ahead of the curve, behind the curve, or right on the curve? Unfortunately, the majority of Americans are behind the curve.
Yeah, I think a lot of Americans don't even know where the curve is. They have no idea. Almost 25% of Americans have said they have no idea how much they have saved for retirement.
Scary.
So you ask them, hey, what's your nest egg? How much is in your army of dollar bills? What do you have going on there? How much you have saved? And they go, I don't know. How can you possibly know if you're on track if you don't know where you are? One of the best things you can do is right now, today, start tracking your net worth. If you've never done it before, go to learn.moneyguy.com, download our net worth template, and start tracking your net worth so you can actually see, where am I at? Because you don't want to be an ostrich. Because whether you like it or not, retirement, old age, aging is going to come. You want to make sure that you're prepared for it.
If you're part of that 25% that has no idea, you don't have enough. I'll just go ahead and just cut off the corner and tell you. I also think it's interesting is that people who get in this situation of the crossroads moment, they're behind, they procrastinated, they sometimes start looking for the shortcut to make up. They're losing the resource of time. So I'll just go be riskier. Maybe I should have bought Bitcoin. Maybe I should have done NVIDIA. They think about all these desperate decisions. Be careful trying to catch up by taking on more risk than you should for your age.
Yeah, look, as a 40-year-old, you don't have the same amount of time that a 20 or a 30-year-old has, but your dollars can still be so valuable. Brian, do you have the thing? Can you hold the thing? If you go to moneyguide.com/resource, I want you to check out our wealth multiplier, because one of the beautiful things it shows is even for folks in their 40s, your dollars still have juice. Your dollars can still work for you. So don't lose track of that. Don't lose sight of it. And the other thing you have to recognize, and this is going to be a little counterintuitive, because I think the average American screws this up, especially in their 40s. They begin putting the oxygen mask on their kids before they put it on themselves. All of a sudden, your kid starts getting on, like, hey, okay, I got to go buy that first car for them, and they need a nice car. And I got to make sure they're doing the camps, and I got to make sure they're doing the travel, and I got to make sure they're doing this, and they're going to college. Well, I didn't have the opportunity, so I'm going to send them to whatever. And you start doing all these things where you prioritize creating a life for your child that you did not have, but what you don't recognize is you were actually sacrificing your future well-being by doing that. It is counterintuitive as parents, but we have to recognize that we need to make sure that we are on solid financial footing, a solid financial foundation before we try to start supporting our children in their financial future.
Yeah, I mean, your children will have options for college, whether it's grants, scholarships, loans. There's nobody out there looking at them. You know what you need? You need a retirement grant. You know what you need? You need an athletic retirement scholarship. There is no such thing for any of those things. So make sure you plan accordingly. Your kids will have opportunities. And look, I'm hopeful, just so you guys don't think we're cruel about this. If you follow our financial order of operations, there is going to be an opportunity to save and invest for your children's education, but you're going to do it at the right time, the right place to still maximize your best financial life.
So let's talk about what are the folks in the 40s, what does their millionaire mindset look like? What are the behaviors they implement? Well, the first one is they've mastered the financial order of operations. Brian, we hold the thing up.
Let me get to it.
Now, mastered it does not mean that they've completed it. Mastered it does not mean that they've made it all the way to step 9. Mastered it means they understand they have a roadmap. They know where they are today, they know where they want to be in the future, and they know the steps that they ought to be taking to move there. So if you don't know the financial order of operations, go to moneyguy.com/resources and download your free copy and make sure you're following the tried and true steps to building wealth for the future.
Yeah, I also want to tell you, I think a good behavior is that you're not waiting to figure out, are you ahead of the curve, behind the curve? You're actually an active participant in making sure your plan. Think about like step 7 of the financial order of operations, hyperaccumulation. That's where you're looking at the 3 bucket strategy. This is where you're questioning, hey, I'm not just trying to maximize my tax savings as I'm saving for retirement. I'm thinking about, hey, if I retire in my 50s or if I retire in my 60s, how will I actually get access? Where's it going to come from? I like being specific about your plan and stress testing, creating a plan. Don't let life happen. Be an active participant. Be the star of your feature film of life. Just be there and be involved and be present and make it maximize every opportunity you can.
And maybe you're there saying, okay, I want to be specific about my plan, but I don't know how. I need a tool. I need something to help me. We actually have a resource for it. If you go to learn.moneyguy.com, you can check out our Know Your Number course. And we actually walk you through, okay, what should the finish line be? If I know that I want to live this type of lifestyle, and I'm going to have this rate of return, and I want to make these inflation assumptions, when am I going to be financially independent? Or how much do I need to save to be financially independent? What is my number? What is the thing that I'm working towards? In your 40s is when you ought to start having some clarity around this so that you can make sure the steps I'm taking today are actually moving me towards that ultimate end goal.
As we close out kind of on the 40s, I think it's interesting is that in your 40s, you will be reaching some of your peak earning years. So you might have the opportunity to have more money. There's also, if you've procrastinated, you've probably recognized, wow, maybe I wasn't so disciplined in my 20s and 30s like I should have, but that's okay. I'm willing to be disciplined now because you realize I don't have as much time on my side. I have waited, but it's okay. This is the last stop on the 25% gross income savings rate can still move the needle in a very meaningful way in your 40s. You just got to get very serious with your discipline and putting your money to work so you can maximize the time that is left for the future.
And because you still do have time, let's look at the actual numbers. Do you realize if you're a 40-year-old and you say, hey, I know that I need to save I don't have enough yet, but I want to save another $1 million by the time that I get to retirement. In order to do that, you need to be saving about $1,000 a month. Or if you're a 40-year-old and you've already been saving, you've accumulated $136,000 so far, you're already on track to be a millionaire by the time you get to 65. But if you wait till 45 and that time begins to constrict, it does get harder. By 45, it's going to take an extra $1,800 of savings every month to add $1 million to your portfolio. And by the time you get to 49, it's almost $3,000 a month required to get you to millionaire status. But if you've been doing the work you're supposed to be doing, if you've been saving, if you've been diligently building assets, and by 49, you've saved up at least $322,000 of investable assets, that lump sum has the potential to more than triple, to more than turn into $1 million by the time you get to retirement.
Yeah, I think it is interesting when you look at these two columns and what they represent, the monthly investment starting from zero versus where your lump sum needs to be at this day. It is one of those things, if you have started early and done it often and maximized the value of time being on your side, you're going to find that those are the people who had started saving $100, $200, $300 a month, and now it's reaching this critical mass of multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars versus the person that maybe rock and rolled and lived that rock star life, you better hope that you did hit it with your peak earning years in your 40s, because it's going to require it. It's going to require you to be very disciplined to maximize the opportunity that's left.
If you want to know where you are, we have a resource, moneyguy.com/resource. You can see, am I on track to be a millionaire? How much do I need to be saving to hit millionaire status, or how much do I need to have saved? So if you have not checked that out, go to moneyguy.com/resources and check out that free deliverable. I
want to talk about the 50s. This is an interesting one. I think, I've been very transparent about it as I've transitioned into this decade. It's not an easy one. Your mortality becomes very apparent to you. You think about look. I feel like I've done a life well lived. So I'm celebrating the decisions I've made, but I'm also recognizing, man, it might not always be like this. I can't take my health for granted. I can't take that I'm always going to be able to do memory building like I have. So I think it's okay to be sentimental. We talk about there's get wealthy behaviors, there's stay wealthy behaviors. This is hopefully the decade where you are focusing on the stay wealthy, but that's unfortunately not what we're seeing with the average American.
Yeah, when we look at the average American, they have a very different mindset than what Brian just described. The average American in their 50s has no plan for retirement, and because they have no plan, they don't want to think about it. And somehow it's almost like ignorance is bliss. That does not help. If you actually look at the numbers, the median household age 55 to 64 right now has $185,000 saved in retirement accounts. Well, if you just assume the 4% safe withdrawal rate rule, that $185,000 will only generate about $7,400 per year in retirement. It is going to be hard to truly be financially independent at that level of savings. So you need to understand where you are and do you have a plan in place. But unfortunately, most folks in their 50s don't want to think about it. Out of sight, out of mind, I'll deal with it later.
Well, I don't want people to try as we call it, the Hail Mary approaches, where you're like really desperate, you're behind, and so you start making those desperate decisions and investing in dumb doctor deals or other things that are so out on the speculative investment spectrum that you really run a high chance of just putting your financial life in the ditch.
And then the other thing that the average American has done is their financial behavior has not matured. When you are a young financial person, it's okay if you're making young financial person mistakes and you might have a debt issue, or you might learn about debt for the first time. By the time you get to your 50s, debt should no longer be a struggle. You have had a lifetime to figure out, hey, this stuff is not good for me. This stuff does not help me. This stuff can hurt me. But the average American still struggles with it. They still have the credit card debt. They still have the car loans. They have the student loans. They have not recognized that debt is detrimental long-term, and they've not mastered that very basic financial mutant skill.
Yeah, I'll be a little harsh with this. I think if you're in your 50s and you're not paying cash for vehicles, what are you doing? I mean, seriously, if you're having because I think the problem, people think time on the planet has now put them in this position where, hey, I had my season where I was driving the Toyota Corolla. I want a nice car. Yeah. No, if you don't have the money in the bank, if you can't pay cash for the vehicle, then don't make those financial napalm decisions that are going to continue to work against you. Because if you think it's bad while you're in the 50s and you still have some years ahead of you that you can save and invest, it's going to be really, really tough as you enter retirement, where your ability to work and pay for expenses with labor is going to slowly start going away. Yep. I hate to be harsh like that, but it is. True. You've got to have something that bridges the gap, and that's where hopefully if you've been saving and investing, it can be the gap filler to actually work for you. Your army of dollar bills should be working harder than you can, but people get in a lot of trouble.
But you said, Brian, in the 50s, it's been different for you. There is a millionaire mindset, a mutant mindset you can have. So if you have been doing the things that you're supposed to be doing and you're in the place you should be, if you want to have the millionaire behavior in your 50s, you're now preparing to land the retirement plane. You're now beginning to get your head wrapped around, okay, I have a plan and I may not quite be there yet, but I can see the runway. And I understand the things that I need to be doing right now to prepare for that soft landing, to make sure this next stage, this next transition is smooth.
Yeah, and I think what you can hopefully, if you were taking the relationship to the next level, because you are getting to that point where you've only had, this is going to be your first retirement. And you don't want to be green behind the ears and make some rookie mistakes or have a blind spot on something you just weren't prepared for. So this probably is the stage where you'll consider taking the relationship to the next level and working with us.
Yep.
And here's what a financial advisor can hopefully help you work through is not only the stress test to tell you how well is that plane going to land. Is it easy? Is this thing going to fall apart as it approaches land, or is it actually going to hold up and land well? And then beyond, is it going to go to a hangar that you actually like the life that you're living after you do leave retirement? So you got stress testing. I always think a good financial planner is also going to help you because you're going to have the 3 pots of money. You're going to have your after tax, your pre-tax, and you're going to have your tax free. How do you get some of those tax-deferred assets into Roth assets? You're going to do a Roth conversion strategy. I think people are always shocked when they find out that every year there's going to be a test on your Social Security income, on your Medicare income. Medicare premiums are going to be determined by what your income was last year. And somebody needs to help you navigate all of that, as well as trying to balance how much in the 3 pots of money. There's all kind of maximization strategies. And like I said, you're going to be learning about all this. I don't want you to have that knowledge come to you and where you're trying to learn on the fly and miss an opportunity that if you'd have just paid somebody to help you maximize this opportunity, it'd have been so much less stress, as well as you to maximize the opportunity and been the better version of yourself financially.
I love what you started there. It's this realization that in my financial life, in my 50s, I've now graduated beyond the basics. I'm not trying to answer the basic questions around budgeting. How do I live on less than I make? I'm now thinking about the higher order stuff. Okay, what does Medicare look like? What does Social Security look like? Where will my money come from? What will my tax situation look like? How do I make sure I'm insured? Am I in the later steps of the financial order of operations? Am I prepaying for future expenses? Am I starting to become debt free? You recognize that there are other higher level items that are now commanding your attention, not how do I make the ends meet? How do I go from this last paycheck to my next paycheck? Once you're at this stage of life, you should be beyond those basic financial levels.
Well, and also think about commercial airplanes. They require 2 pilots. Because they don't want you, you have a heart attack in the middle of the air. If you're your own private aviation company, you're flying your own private plane. If you have a heart attack, you're at peril. But when you have a commercial plane, you've got a whole group of people. And I think a lot of us in our financial life, we have a whole group of people, especially if you're the financial mutant, that is looking at your life. And it might be your significant, your spouse. It might be the kids. There's a lot of obligations out there. Have a co-pilot on that part of it. I think that is a big part. And then also knowing what you can and can't do. A lot of people, I think they don't realize you go through your entire career being disciplined on living on less than you make and being rewarded for saving and investing. And then when you leave the workforce, now you're supposed to start consuming these assets. That's not the easiest transition. If you've been doing something for 30 or 40 years and now somebody says, hey, you got enough money, go spend. You're like, no, I'm tight. And I'm like, no, go spend some of this money. It's nice to have somebody to be there to say, yes, I can show you the plan, show you why it's okay to start consuming what you have spent decades building. And then also like that we're the backup plan. I mean, do you know how many of you financial mutants, you are brilliant with your financial life, but your significant other, because you've done such a good job, they're not keeping up with it. You might be doing the net worth meeting with them every year, but they're not paying attention. And what happens when you can't speak? And you're like, oh my gosh, this wonderful world of finance that I've built all these resources with, there's a lot of crooks out there. There's a lot of snakes in the grass. How do I have a backup plan? That's what I want you to think about. You've got to have a plan. And here's what we have realized when you look at the research. 97% of retirees who wake up with a strong sense of purpose, they're happier than their peers. So why not navigate that so you are living your best life, not just building up assets so you reach the number goal without having the mindset tied into the purpose and your why all intersecting at the right point.
I love it. The 20s, 30s, 40s was so quantitative. It was so much about the numbers. As you get in your 50s, it is quantitative. But as you think about this next endeavor, as you think about the next stage, it is qualitative. It's a lot of those softer thoughts, those softer discussions. Okay, what is this next phase and stage of my life going to look like? And the more clarity you have around that, the more likely you are to set yourself up for success. So let's look at the numbers. If you are 50 years old and you have been saving and you've built up some level of wealth, if you've built up $351,000, you're already on pace to be a millionaire by the time that you get to age 65. By 55, if your goal is to be a millionaire, you need to have at least $522,000 saved up. And by the time you get to the end of your 50s, by the time you get on the cusp of that 60-year-old time frame, you need to have almost $700,000 if you want to be a millionaire. But by this stage, your goal should no longer be, hey, I just want to be a millionaire. I just want to be a millionaire. You should know your number. You should know what number is what you need to achieve to be able to live the life that you want to live on your terms. And in your 50s, you should be making concrete steps towards that goal. And the finish line ought to be in sight so that you can make sure you finish the drill well.
Yeah, I think hopefully a lot of you, if you're watching the older, seeing if you're in your 30s and saying, hey, what do I need to be thinking about 50 and beyond? You go out there, you see these numbers, and hopefully it's going to be a reward on your sacrifice and your discipline in the past. But go check out the resource we have. Are You on Track to Be a Millionaire? moneyguy.com/resources. I think a great way to close out this show, because we've loaded you up with tons of free stuff that you can go check out with our resources. We've shared some of the tools. We've even shared the abundance cycle as if you want that co-pilot so you can land the plane safely, consider reaching out to us and working with us. But remember, be an active participant, because abundance is understanding that wealth combined with purpose, that's actually is where abundance lives. So respect that. I'm your host, Brian Preston, Bo Hansen, Money Guy Team, out.